Yeah, welcome everybody to Lightroom, space solely dedicated to the art of lighting and not to the tech part. Today's going to be a little bit of an exception. It's really exciting because when it started at Lightbridge, as a gaffer, you don't get to meet your colleagues. Meeting these amazing guys now through the company and through all the stuff we're doing is really exciting to share this stuff that we've been doing with Reflectors, or reflective media in general, actually, what we're going to be talking about today. So I got Freddie Bonfanti with us from the UK, Frank Omer from Denmark, and John Roche from New York. And what we're going to do is we're all used to staying behind the camera. So if you've got any questions, always just come up and ask them. It's all good. And we'll start out with a picture that John gave me. Want to say something about that?
Well, I found this a while ago, and it just reminded me that, so often we're just going back to the beginnings of cinematography and the beginnings of lighting. And, the thing that interested me initially about Christian Berger's work and the CRLS system was it's a reinvention of a tool that's been around from the beginning, right? It's rethinking reflected light, rethinking the reflected lighting board. And here we see, how many years ago these guys are out there lighting with reflected light. And so Christian's just brilliantly sort of said, well, how can we make this better? How can we improve this? And looking at the surfaces that we bounce light into, reflect light into. And so that was my initial interest in entry into CRLS.
I mean, yeah, as you say, we've been using reflectors and bouncing of stuff all along. Freddie, what kind of bounce materials do you like to use these days? Just not even the CRLS, just in general. Is there any kind of medias are interesting for you?
I mean, personally, I learned the art of reflecting light on a film set through being a UK gaffer for an American gaffer called David Lee, and he sort of taught me how to use soft silver and all types of silver, and for me that was a revelation, Initially with source 4s, bouncing source 4s into silver and HMI, it was something that in the UK wasn't done on a larger scale. Like on a big film, you wouldn't really go indirectly. So for me, that was the beginning of my fascination with the system, So soft silver definitely, and then the fact that you get this system and you can use, oh wow, there's different types of materials. The reflectance changes with every single reflector. So I mean, that was for me incredibly interesting, and it's a way to sort of move on from what you know and get, to be honest, be brave, to experiment. So I mean, that was for me what made it.
When you say soft silver, is that like the shiny boards, the Rosco stuff, or are you talking about like butterflies, soft silver and big frames?
Butterflies and soft silver and frames, and also experimented with lames, and silver and on the Rosco line as well.
How did you use them? In front of a window, or was it like outside and then lighting through? Or?
Well, it was, we did this film that never saw the light of day called London Fields, which was a terrible movie in a lot of respects, and that's why it probably never came out. But I think the cinematography was Guillermo Navarro shot it, David Lee was the American gaffer and I was the UK gaffer, but it was simple things like, rather than using in a dome, it was a dome in London, rather than using like the easy way, like a balloon light into space where you couldn't really put anything else, he hung, I think it was a 20 by 20 silver on steel wires. It was just angled the right way. And that gave you a different type of light. The quality was incredible. It wasn't spilling everywhere like a balloon would. So for me, that was like, oh, look, you can actually control this source so much better. And,
What source were you lighting into it?
We had, at the time, I think it was before the M series came in, so it was PARs. There was a lot of PAR HMIs, and it was fantastic. It was like, it's not something that we used to do on a big scale in England, So that was great. So that started my fascination with the whole reflecting, indirect lighting on film sets.
Yeah, I mean, I can go on with that. When I started, my first job, I think, was painting polys, black and white. So I started with polys, That was the first media I bounced into.
We've been having some DPs that wanted the polys painted to give it a color like the walls, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I do that. I have blue and gray. Not poly, but on another surface.
Would you use the gray? Can you all hear me if I talk like that? Or should I go into the mic? Mic. Okay. Oof, okay. Let's cuddle up. What do you use the gray for?
I mean, I start with the blue because when I'm outside and I'll use it to do the fill because the sky is blue. But if it's a gray day, I'll use the gray. Sorry. If it's a gray day, I will use the gray to fill in.
And what do you put into it generally?
What light is there?
Yeah.
Of course, if it's sun, I need more. I will bounce the sun into it.
Yeah, Freddie wants to say something.
Has anyone ever asked you to bounce light into black?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I had that once, and I have to say, I put my hand up in shame. I was like, "Do you want me to bounce into black?" So yeah, bounce into black, and we did. I think it was like a mole beam into a black shiny. It wasn't a textile. It was like a material that we had custom made. It was incredible. The light sort of took the edge off the hard light, and it was really soft on the edges. I was pleasantly surprised.
It's because I remember I read an article in American Cinematographer that Daus did it on, I think it was Alien, and I thought, and lots of DOPs wanted. They got it. Yeah, they got it from there.
The old AC magazine.
That's just the story I wanted to tell. When they were doing Alien and they were doing the miniature versions of the spacecraft, and they were trying to figure out how does light look in space actually. And it was like this tremendous learning process of seeing it just doesn't look good. You go through a frame, it doesn't look good. And then apparently they had these huge American-sized black wraps in frames, and somebody was just walking past it with a light. Said, "Oh, stop it!" And that was the beginning of that. Yeah.
But it needs a lot of light.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking extremely a lot of light to do this, and I don't think it's so practical.
But isn't it interesting because like when we're talking about reflecting, right? It's not only about the surface itself, it also the surrounding does with it. So when you're saying like you use the blue sky because the blue sky is there or it's a gray sky, I've never done that actually. But it's interesting, the backside actually of the ultra bounce, if you don't light it, has this grayish thing as well. Sometimes I just leave that for that reason.
Well, I mean, if you're doing a sunset scene, the most famous magic hour, you're actually mixing, you got a lot of blue there. So much blue. You're talking about over 10,000 Kelvin of blue, and then you got that little pinpoint of warm. And everyone tries desperately to replicate that, but they forget in a studio to add that blue. It's so important that you have that, I think its color is so important when you do bouncing as well. And I'm not surprised that I think we're going to evolve into materials that have got a tint more than we are already doing.
Yeah, I think it's the cold ambient light is normally when I see people do it. It's not as cold as I would do it. I would go 10,000 Kelvin at least.
I mean, it's just Freddie's saying really, it's not just about the blue. It's not just about the warmth of the sun. It's actually the blue sky that makes it look warmer, and it's just the color combination. That's kind of interesting in there. Yeah. What else have you done in terms of? I'll switch directly because you were telling me that what you were doing is you were using like a muslin, and then you were putting the super white diffusion whites inside the muslin to get a little bit more punch out of that. Did I understand that correctly?
Outside windows? Or?
Yeah.
No. If I want to control the contrast, I've done where I start with the half soft frost, that I'll break the natural light or the ambience that's coming in, but then if I don't want to have the reflections of the half soft frost, I'll put a black silk underneath that to directionalize it, nearly like a honeycomb.
So the black silk acts like
as a honeycomb.
Like,
Yeah,
okay.
as a honeycomb.
Because often you give yourself away with the reflection because if it's a big white source, it's just going to be in everything, right?
Yeah.
And by adding something underneath of that, and I also do like on overheads outside, you've got a 20 by for daylight and then just a single net underneath. Just doesn't feel all like a huge white surface above to do that, yeah. Yeah. What do you do in terms of controlling bounced light? Like what do you have done before the reflectors to kind of control the light? Is it like just in front of windows or?
Well, I think that's what's interesting about CRLS, because that brings up when we because it's a soft source, right? It's a bounce source. We're bouncing into Muzz or Poly or Ultra Bounce or whatever it is. And then you've got suddenly a jungle that starts to get built. You know, you've got to have two floppies here. Then you need a meat axe on top to take it down. And then you need something maybe from under. And before you know it, you've grown into this huge jungle on the side of your set. And so when you come over to the CRLS, you've got much more control, and you know, they come in different sizes, right? So you're picking a size relative to your spread and the quality. So you've got choices of 4 different, in terms of CRLS, you've got a choice of 4 different surfaces, and then 5 different sizes. And then if you look at a lot of Jakob's work on larger features, you see where he's using maybe 100 by reflector, and then he's got maybe 1 or 2 other smaller, harder sources. So you now have got this combination of soft and hard, which you see all the time naturally in a room where light bounces off or refracts off, you know, different places. And then often with the CRLS, you don't have, and this is what Christian's, I think, initial purpose was to reduce all the clutter, free the space for the director, for the actors, sort of bringing it back to its sort of essential, you know, roots of lighting.
I mean, for feature film, that's one thing, but maybe we should look at a picture from a commercial you did, because it still looks like a normal commercial, even with the CRLS. Let's maybe look at that, yeah?
This is a shower scene we did for a L'Oreal commercial. And do you have the photo of the... Can you go from that to that?
This, no?
Yeah. So when you see this, it doesn't look very complex, but it became that really fast. But all the highlights on her is made with the reflectors. Yeah.
Is there something you can say about, because like John was saying, actually get really nice control with the reflectors, but you're still then bringing in like nets and silks to break it down again?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's just control of, and if the DP don't like where the reflectors, or if it's too hard, I will break it, of course. I'll use silks and scrims.
So you wouldn't go to a softer reflector to do that? You'd actually bring in the silk underneath instead of changing that?
No, no, here it's just to, I mean, if you look what we did here, it's the sky panel we're controlling. It's not really the reflectors. Sorry, Ari.
What I have to say with this picture here, because this is really not we're not meeting here to sell the CRLS. So just to see what Frank has here is, this is still the old K-Flex system that when K-Flex started out, Christian worked together with him. That was the first initial thing like 15 years ago. And where we've evolved over the set has now become the Lightbridge. Just that you see like still old magnet system and stuff and different kinds of surfaces with it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I like the new system. Much more secure and...
Not a trade show, not a trade show. So let's, yeah.
I just wanted to say, I've been using reflectors for so many years now, but in the start when I really got in love with reflecting light, I was using kitchen utilities, because if I was shooting in a kitchen, I would really like to shoot a hard light down in a sink, and the accident from the sink, the hard spill that went out to the room was really nice. And I think I'm still finding new ways or new materials and surfaces that I really like.
Maybe we should look at Freddie's video because it's interesting what he was doing with with the reflections and the movement of that stuff for that case, yeah. If this is too geeky, let us know if there's some basic stuff that's missing. And yeah.
No, I'm just curious, how many people here are gaffers? Just a couple, everybody else is DPs or?
Let's see how many
Okay.
DOPs.
And how many people have used DPs? Okay, and how many people have used CRLS at all? Okay, great, thanks.
So all of them that haven't used the system, do you need a general introduction into the system, or is it basically clear?
I've kind of read about it in American cinematographer and stuff like that, so I kind of get the idea, but it'd be nice if you give us some specifics, like saying this light bounces off this mirror to give this effect. That would be helpful.
Sure. Sure. Okay, just hang with me with a second. I'm winging it totally. Maybe Johnny can help me out. You guys, just if you explain basically the system, and then I'll find the video in the meantime.
You're the longest user?
I'm the longest user.
Well,
Okay. What?
I was just going to say, you know, these two guys have been using some form of CRLS and reflected light for, what, 15 years, right? I mean, I've probably been doing it now 2 years. So I was going to give it to you to give a little explanation.
Yeah, but I mean, when the first time I saw this was on a YouTube video that Christian made. He put at that time he had the panny on a really big boom, and it was a really big thing, and the reflectors was like 5 meters away, and they was put in a cluster like this, and I thought, that looks interesting. I have to check out what this is. And I went on net and I found the K-Flex system, and I just bought it straight away. And then I started using it, but there's a learning curve. Doesn't go from one day to another. It'll take some days. Yeah.
I suppose the reason why we're talking is because it kind of like changes your perception how you light. And I feel like for anyone who's into film lighting, you're a DP or a gaffer, even a director, who appreciates what we do, is like, it's a new way of lighting a film set. And I think that's terribly exciting, because you're like, you're having to throw your knowledge away and accepting a new system that might be difficult to understand at first, but then it streamlines, when you master it and when you really understand it, it streamlines the process. And as a gaffer or a DOP, I think streamlining the process can be quite helpful. So I think it's natural for people to be drawn to it, because it's new, right? And you have to challenge yourself to, and I think that's why gaffers get excited, because it's like, you know, I'm no longer having to do the things I used to do, you know, put the 20K, then the sea of diffusion, the muslin, the smoke and everything. Wow, there's a new way of doing it, and makes it more interesting. It actually makes your job a bit more like exciting. It's like, this is new, let's get excited. So I think that for me, that will draw me to the process, you know?
I think I just fell in love with it straight away. The possibilities are so endless, and I find new ways of using it nearly every day, because it's so fantastic and precise. I think that the control I really like. Yeah.
Sorry. I think there's two things I want to say. One is there's the choice of different reflective surfaces that give you a different quality of diffused light. But the other thing that Christian did, which is just absolutely brilliant, is that he's figured out a way to make the inverse square law work to our advantage, right? So with a lot of the bigger feature stuff that Jakob's been doing and these guys have been doing, is they get the light much, much farther away from the reflector. So the light is essentially traveling to the reflector and then to set. So you're effectively doubling your distance. So for example, when Christian and Jakob were doing the Angelina Jolie film By the Sea, these lights are on the ground, and you mentioned the panel light, which maybe we should talk about more specifically, but essentially a very collimated light source. So light can travel a great distance into the reflector, and you don't have a huge amount of light loss that you would say with the traditional ARRI M90 or whatever. So then the actors can walk up to the window and not blow out. You don't need a field of flags and nets to, you know, scrim them down as they get closer to the window. And you get a much more realistic quality of light, a natural fall off because of that extra distance.
Yeah, I'll just quickly run through it as a basic. So basically, I started working with Christian 15 years ago and using really prototypes, and more going into bigger productions, which caused more and more headaches because it was all only prototypes. So I was building in the cellar, trying to get all the problems solved that were necessary. Now 3 years ago, I was at the point to say, okay, working together with the Bosch laboratory, we're at a stage now where actually we test the stuff down to the last damn thing to be sure that we can share it with colleagues. So that was basically the process behind it. Yeah, Christian called it the Reflect lighting system, unpronounceable, but that's what we have, CRLS. And if you look at this video, it's just about showing what natural quality of light is. It's quality of shadows, so you have to see my face again. And the fall off of the light's nice. Now it looks like real daylight. Now when we're pushing the camera back, you'll actually see it's night outside. And the next thing you'll see is there's hardly any gear standing around. Now, when Laszlo moves the reflector, you'll see a complete change in the mood. With small changes, you can change the complete room. So you've got two things: control the diffused light, controlling the light itself, plus an immense amount of output because you only have 3% light loss. So that's the basic approach of using the system. Now we've done a lot of movies: White Ribbon, By the Sea, Military is using a Jessica Jones, Alienist, and the Ryan Reynolds movies, so we're doing big stuff with it right now. This is all in German, but I'll just go right away to the thing I want to show you. Anyway, so there's 4 different kinds of surfaces. I'm more the color guy, and for the people that are more the number guys, it's black diffusion number 1. That's the hardest. This is going to be a little bit softer than a real mirror. A real mirror doesn't need to be reinvented. It's a great tool to use with all the disadvantages coming with it. And then you go to punch black, which is a little bit softer, so it takes off the hard edges. So if you're using a light source that's not perfect, it's just going to blend it out a little bit. Then you've got diffusion number 2, blue, which is already softer. That's a real workhorse because you get a lot of punchiness still out of it. Then you've got violet, diffusion number 3, and then you got super white, which is already a very wraparoundy kind of a source. It's subsurface scattering. It's similar to snow. So with these 4 reflectors and 5 sizes is basically what the CRLS is right now. Yeah.
So in that video that you showed, that was coming in, what reflector was that was coming in through the window?
So there's a couple of things going on right here. Let me just stop the video at a certain point. It was interesting lighting a scene and actually setting up so it could be in shot 2 in 1. Never did that before. So, bam. Okay, so if you look to your left, you've got the 4.7. What you see over there too, and it's lighting down onto the 1x1 black. And this is then going back onto the next 1x1 here, which is blue, and this is creating your light inside here. So this is your basic key light. So it's a double reflection, black to blue coming in. At the same time, we hit a little small 25 by 25 centimeter black, which is actually going through the window up into the ceiling. That's what's creating your fill light up there. So that allows you to move your actor really close to the window just until you would cast a shadow up here. The actors would get in the face. So that's the basic light here. Then we've got another 4.7 here, lighting up into a 50 by 50 black and pushing into a violet 1x1 meter, which is giving you a fill light. So I was obviously missing a wall here to get the natural flow of light working in the room to get it directed in that direction. So that's basically the setup here. Do you guys do a lot of double reflection?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
yes.
I think double reflection, you get into that when you get time, right? Yeah. And I think that's when you're like, I've got a chance to experiment and make things, you know, even more interesting. But I feel like if you're in a rush, I probably wouldn't do. Probably somebody will start screaming at me, what are you doing? Double reflections. But so you start, I would say that it really depends where you are and what you're doing.
That's one of the things, and a lot of preconceptions out with everybody talking about is, oh, you only need one light source and you can do 50 reflectors. I'm so old school and I like to be fast when I work. So the more complicated it gets me a headache. If I have to change 3 reflectors going across the room, it's just going to cost me too much time. So double reflection is in my system now, so it's a fast setup.
I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the choice is to do a double reflection.
Well, you always start with the hardest one. So basically, when you reflect off the first one, it's going to be a black or a blue, and then you're always going to move to the next softer one. So it's going to be blue and blue, or blue and violet, or blue and white. Doing it the other way around just physically doesn't make sense.
But I guess what I meant is, how is that changing the quality? Rather than just using, saying, a number 2, if you go into black and then into number 2, so black being the hardest, right, close to the mirror, 2 is the next one down. Making that choice versus just going into number 2, what's the difference?
I'll let Frank answer that.
I mean, it's like double diffusing, I think. It's like double diffusing. I mean, a double grid, or you're just making it softer.
No, I know the answer myself, but I was just wondering, you know, I'm sure people are wondering, like, why the hell would you double bound? What's the point? Like, what do you gain, you know? And
it will be softer on the face.
I mean,
if you're using it on the face,
right,
or in the background,
right.
And it's also the inverse square law. The further your light can travel, the less fall off you have. You can see it over here. We did a setup of one stand going down and going up. It's just suddenly in really small spaces. You can really just expand, blow out the walls basically from where your light comes from. Do you guys, when you're using big reflectors, sorry, yeah?
John, do you want to talk about chasing the sun around for that commercial that we did? Because that was double reflectors because the sun was moving and you were getting the sun wherever it was to go back into where you wanted it to go.
I'm sorry, which job is that?
The Krylon.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was interesting because we were in a backyard, tight space, behind a house, and we had a 20 by overhead something, silk or something, and we needed to, we had no money. We had, I think, one light, which I don't think we ever brought out. We were blessed with sun all day long, both days. So all day long, we would just have 100 by, and we'd redirect that into another reflector. So we get the light exactly where we need it on set. So as the sun moves through the day, we just are moving our reflectors around, and because we want to key from the right side, the sun's over, you know, somewhere else where we don't want it. We've got the overhead, and it's so fast, and we just choose the quality of light we want, and you know, that's our whole day, our whole shoot.
The inverse square law, that's like if you've normally got like a little Chinese lantern or something, they start getting hotter as they get towards it. This is basically the solution to that, where people aren't getting too hot when they get towards the source.
That is precisely what happens. The more diffused the surface is, the more you're going to feel it, that you're moving towards it, obviously. So in the super white, you're going to feel the fall off less because it becomes more and more your light source. But the more harder your reflector is, the more it's going to feel like the light source is further away. Exactly. Yeah.
Can you do tracking shots with it? With someone who whistles forward on their shoulder? And, one of them up above?
I think it depends on the reflectance of the material, right? And when it starts becoming noticeable on a tracking shot. But I mean, technically, I probably wouldn't, because I feel like if you're moving, the last thing you want to do is to jeopardize things by adding and bouncing. So probably one unit that is simple and streamlined and steady. but it depends where you're tracking, and there's a lot of variables, but I probably wouldn't do it on as I was moving, maybe. But you know, if you're, what you're talking about, tracking vehicles or something like that?
Yeah,
Or
track off the back of Steadicam.
On what?
Steadicam tracking. I mean,
Instead of a Chinese lantern over the top. Or
well, the thing about the Chinese lantern over the top, it's like, I think I got a loud voice, but I think the Chinese lantern example is, you know, it's a good example because it's lightweight, especially the LED ones. I mean, it's, you know, it's one of those setups where you don't need, you know, you're using the lightest thing and quickest thing to sort of like make things as easy for you as possible. I don't think you'd want to start getting into, I mean,
It's the smarter choice for that
I
setup.
mean,
for
every
that,
tool for
yeah.
every job, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like not for this particular case.
No. Now, I've done some things where, you know, the actor's moving from point A to point B, and maybe it's a steady camera, maybe it's a dolly shot, and you've got 4 reflectors along a path that you're hitting, and so the actor's either coming in and out of those, or you're trying to make a continuous, you know, back edge or whatever. So that's possible, but I don't think it would make sense to do it on with you know, running with the steady camera.
Have you done that?
In a hall in a hospital, where we had a person that came. I did one where I like took the, but it's I don't like doing, what do you call it? In the face. But I did it because there was no other possibility, and I just dialed it down. I just dimmed it down when they came closer.
Yeah. Actually, what I did do is, that's the reason I remembered in a hospital where there were a lot of fluorescent tubes on the top, and was just kind of trying to extend the Steadicam was walking out front, and was just trying to extend the light a little bit from one fluorescent tube to the next because we had them a little bit skirted down. I did use, I think, a Diffusion number 3, and I walked with it, but just to extend it a little bit. It's hairy, you know. The thing is, the reflectors, it's really precise with the output, but that also means if you have it in your hand, you're gonna see a difference. With the super wide, you wouldn't. So it was like one of those things with a stomach ache to pull it off, yeah. But I think in that case, having an Astera and going up and down with it, maybe it's just.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I just reminded me of another thing. One of the first questions I asked him, and I hear him get asked this question all the time, is, well, what do you do outside? It's windy. And it's interesting because it becomes not a problem with the softer reflectors. I remember, I forget if it was on Gender's job or we had one rigged on a 20 by, and there, you know, the wind's moving the 20 by a little bit, but there, you know, we had a back edge off a violet reflector with I think a Joe Lico into it, right? And that thing is moving, and you can't see anything. It's just perfectly beautiful.
When an American says Joe Lico, it's joker bug into source 4 because we call them source 4s, they call them Licos. Just thought that would help.
Let's have a look at the commercial that Frankie did. Yeah.
I mean, the wind thing, it's really windy in Denmark, but if I do the trick and have a lamp in a cherry picker, it will move if the wind is too much anyhow, so there's no difference.
Yeah, it was when we were doing not the right ribbon, the notebook. We had the first time really cherry pickers, and it was like, we had it tested on the field, so I started out putting the lamp into the basket plus the reflector, so obviously it doesn't make a lot of sense. But because I was afraid, you know, what if the cherry picker moves like that? So one thing we found out really fast is the Diffusion number 1 does not work on cherry pickers. It's too close to mirror. You got to go to Diffusion number 2, and whatever shivering you would get from a normal mirror doesn't happen. That's the reason I always tell everybody not to call the reflectors mirrors, because it reminds you exactly of that. IKEA and shattering in the wind. So you don't want to do that. So you go, Diffusion 2 is cool. And the other thing is, and that's getting a little bit more into light sources now, if you got a light source with an even spread, like it's really even, not like the M series, more like a Fresnel, more like Pani beams when they were really new for me. They actually still worked, and whatever. So when you have a beam going up like 30 meters into the air, you're going to have on the top like a 10-meter even spread of light. So if the reflector is moving in that even spread of light, you wouldn't see a difference. It's going to be like having like Frank says, a 12K or whatever in the basket. It's just going to move with it and do what it does. You just got to strap it down. But on the other hand, if you have smoke in a room and you want to see the beam, number 2, you won't see anything. So whatever magic happens outside that doesn't affect you with any shivering, it's not going to work inside with smoke. So that's only going to be diffusion 1 that works. Yeah. Let's have a look at the video. Huh? Can I do that for a second? Any questions?
Maybe Frank could elaborate a bit more, because he answered yes, he works with double reflection.
Yeah, but I mean, it takes some time to get the DOPs to see the light sometimes, because I mean, it's really, you have to show what you're doing, because in the start when I used the system, they were like, what are you doing? But when they see how fast it is to work with and how many more shots you can get, and I mean, it'll go by itself, yeah.
We were showing the reflectors in the States, and had a high-profile gaffer coming in and looking at it. And he was looking, first he checked the diffusion, okay, it's soft. And then he went to the side of the reflector and there was no light hitting him anymore. And I saw he was staring there for 3 minutes, going between the soft light and going between the thing. His brain was just processing like 30 years of experience just going down the drain. Yeah, something's different here.
Well, it just reminded me of a story you were telling yesterday about working with the DP and having a light in the middle of the set and being able to quickly redirect it. Maybe you want to...
Yeah, but I do that all the time because I have a panny, and the panny is really powerful. So if I'm shooting 2 directions in a set, I can just have the panny in the middle, and I'll just turn the light and then move the reflectors.
Just it's a history thing again. When Christian first started up with the reflectors, it was all happened through this light laboratory Badenbach, which is in Tyrol. This is an insane architectural company that specializes on more or less reflective medias, I'd say, and how to use it in architecture and stuff. And they had a parabolic beam with an HQI bulb inside because they had to light those buildings that were up really high. So for Christian from the beginning, it was, okay, I get this parallel thing like from the parabolic into the reflector, and this kind of really worked for him. So when that was before I started working with him, they bought those lights from a company called Durlum, which basically does those street lights. And they took that street light and just took the HQI out and put an HMI inside. So all those panny lights that you see are actually Durlum lights just with an HMI bulb in the back and doing that, which was, from the idea, not that bad. I mean, Alfred Dürer already drew parabolic beams, right? But the thing is, you need an infinite small light source inside to make that work. So when you put, Pani had a double-socketed HMI in there, so that's even a smaller filament. So that was, when it was precisely in the center and it didn't move, it was actually good. But on the field, I think 20 were built or so, and the first 2 jobs it worked, and it was so thin inside, I started getting issues with it. And what Dado tried to build with a single socket bulb, it doesn't work. That's the reason it needs the egg crate on the top to carry all the spill light out, because the filament's too big. It just doesn't work. So the whole idea of that is something that Peter Plesner is now thinking about how to solve that. But it's, yeah, from BB&S.
Explaining the panny, I don't know, I hadn't even seen this panny light other than in the photos from Christian's movie. And then I think a couple months ago I was in LA where we have none in New York, not one. But it's essentially a fairly large, heavy parabolic light with a, how many degree? A very narrow, 2 degree spread. So you can imagine it's like a spotlight, a very narrow spotlight.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, would a 5 degree source 4, if they ever come out, yeah, do you know whether it's the same concept, right? You know, source 4s. People don't really know, so LICOs in America, source 4s in Europe, theater lights, people don't really use them so much in film, and when they do, it's a zoom lens. But I always, because I'm progressing to lighting design and do a lot of lighting design work now, it's amazing when you actually look at source 4s with fixed lenses, and they've got, you know, anything like a camera lens from 36 degrees to 50 to 70 to 5 degree. And the actual 5 degree, which is a bit ridiculous because it makes the source 4 quite big, it's great as a, you know, if you want to light, because obviously the further away you put the light, you know, say it's 40, 50 meters away, you know, the light then becomes quite big, doesn't it? So, you know, they can be used in film, not just for reflecting, but also to key somebody from a long distance. And I think that's something that DPs today should look into, because same as moving lights, we are getting to a point where it's all merging. So it's very exciting times, I think, for film lighting.
I mean, there are basically two approaches to get a beam, right? The one is actually to redirect the light in a reflector and try to get all the beams out straight. And the other thing is to have a lens system where it gets out to the front. For me, the 4.7s, yeah, anyway, those who see around standing here all the time, it's just a workhorse for me. Because the thing is, and that's the major thing working inside, you got the blades. So I can put a reflector up and I just can use the blades to cut it down to exactly that where it needs to go. And yeah.
To me, the Source 4 really opened my eyes on a film set one day where the DOP wanted to get a backlight on a bed, right? So what do you do usually? You know, you put like a mega boom or something. You can't rig anything onto the wall. And the American DOP decided, you know, show me a way of doing it with a little bit of silver and the Source 4. And basically, you can just put the piece of silver there, point the Source 4. I think it was a 26-degree Source 4 because he loved the fixed lens, you know, just as DOPs love their prime lenses, because it cuts less light and dust doesn't really gather on the lenses of a zoom. So he was pointing this 26-degree Source 4 into the silver, and with the blades, carefully cutting the light so that it just covered the space, you know, that bit of silver. And if you wanted half a stop less, he'll just bring in one shutter and cut half of it off. And I thought, oh my God, that's such a smart way of doing it, you know. And we ended up using them on a soundstage, you know. We had a lot of polys or silvers and just shooting from the walkways with Source 4s into them, you know. And it was such a fantastic way of working that, to me, it opened my eyes. And now, you know, you can see that working with, you know, because you've got more materials, more reflecting surfaces to choose from. It's not just silver and foam core, and I think it's fantastic. You know, it's a clever way, especially for the students and people that work on a budget, to reduce the footprint on a film set. It really is clever, you know.
Is there a tungsten bulb in the Source 4?
I think Source 4s, tungsten Source 4s, you can get them 750 watt and I think 550. 575, which is crazy. Why would you, when you can have a 750? But I think they're cheap. You can get them from the bottom of the shelf at a lighting company, and it's like a cheap way of doing it. But for me, at the moment, I would rather use a, you know, like a Daylight HD version where it's all, you know, LED, where you can put several of them. You know, ETC, who are sort of the main Source 4 maker, they do a 7-color Source 4, which is not great for the film industry, but I think the HD, the Daylight HD is fantastic because it's bright and it's, you know, it doesn't draw too much power, you know, and that, they do get hot, so the LED version doesn't get hot.
Yeah, you can see it on the set over there. There's daylight and tungsten, so when it switches out around, you can see daylight and tungsten the way it goes. Yeah.
I mean, I use them for inside, but I mean outside.
Did that get turned off?
I know.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
I use them inside, but I need something much more powerful. I mean, if they could make a 4K.
I think you can use a joker bug and put a Source 4 attachment, the Joe Leaker, right?
Yeah.
But it's still not anywhere near as bright. I think
That's the Pani.
that's the Pani, yeah.
That's where in the last feature did have a little money. So we went back to the Suns, our Suns pause, because the frosted lens inside in the full spot, it's actually massive output on 2.5K. And you can get them fairly cheap these days because nobody's using them. And it's actually kind of punchy. And then, but just quickly going into this, you can see in the set over there too with the 12 light. So the rule of thumb always is that the more diffuse the surface is, the less your source is going to matter in terms of quality of light and shadow. not in terms of output. Because if you use a Fresnel in full spot and you're further away, it's going to be really even and beautiful, but you're going to lose like 2/3 of your light. So if you're okay with that because you got an 18K that needed, that's fine. Otherwise, it's going to have to be more collimated than that. Mole beams are out these days, which is, I'll let Frank talk about it. He's got more experience than me on that.
Which
yeah.
film is it?
Let's watch Freddie's first. I brought it up already. Yeah, right. You want to talk what it's about? Just so we see it's commercial, no?
This was a commercial for Calvin Klein we did with Robbie Ryan, and we just wanted to do something. I think Robbie didn't want to use a traditional beauty light, even though it was like a high-end fashion commercial. He wanted to use something, make it a bit more interesting and playing with reflections and reflected light and making it look a bit more dynamic. And I think we did something that in the end looked great using reflective system, mirrors, source force and scenic elements.
Do you use the mole beam on that?
We use a mole beam on a dolly. I think we laid about 20, I think it was 12-foot track with a dolly. We put a mole beam on it with an electrician operating it, and he was moving it and panning it into the set.
Together, we are stronger than we could ever be alone. Calvin Klein.
I feel like sometimes there's a conception that when you do a big fashion thing, you need to have breeze lights, and I think people are a bit scared of hard light. But I think this is a clear example of how to make something that actually, it's very simple as an idea. I mean, we've all done it before. You could even say it's what people experiment with in film school, right? They sort of, what if we use a source for track it? But I think it works even in that context because, it's different. So there's no real rules.
Which reflectors were they?
We had mirrors. I think we used the number 1, and then we had everything. I think we had a lot of them on double combos spinning. So we had real mirrors and reflectors and one source.
So the ones where you can see the chromatic aberration, right?
Yeah, but also, I mean, the set helped because we were getting bounced back from the wall. So,
And I think the shadow thing you see there, that's because of it's a 10K mole, because the filament is like really big, so it's not really so clear.
I think that's a major thing about the reflectors, that it's not only to concentrate on the C reflectors, the aluminum surfaces, but also where it then bounces off from. So this soft, beautiful light, and what's happening is actually happening because of you're pushing a lot of light into a confined space. And that's what's then bouncing back and giving all this beautiful stuff going on, what's going on in there. And actually then just the hard light just becomes the edge to it. So that's something you can see always, the further your light travels, the more you actually can use the room to reflect them, because everything becomes a natural reflective source because the source itself is far away. It makes sense that way. Any questions? We'll move on to the next commercial.
This was done in a parking lot because the DoP and the director really liked the colors. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have the mic? Yeah.
Yeah, I have the mic.
Yeah. How did you light it?
It was a mole beam, 10K mole beam. And the parking lot is under a theater, so it's like in levels. So we took the 10K just up high and shot it down, and then reflect it back with the mirrors.
With reflectors, did you use the hard ones or soft ones there? You don't know.
I have a picture with the pigeons. Find that. This is what we did. And the birds just landed on the C-stands and the reflectors. Of course, did other things on the reflectors. It was a cleaning job after that. And then smoke, of course, very important. Yeah. And we, of course, with the lamps, when we did the pack shot, we did some. It wasn't only with the reflector, because I think we had a mix on the top of it just to do the reflection in the lamp.
Excuse me, on that one. Is the light coming down from the left?
Yeah.
Is that straight from the mold beam, or is that into
Yes,
the mirror
it's,
once?
no, it's straight.
Okay, so it comes down from the mold beam,
Yeah.
that's the mirrors, and then goes up. Okay.
I think, when I see it, yeah, it must be, it's just hitting here.
I think the Sisti are coming out with a new open face LED light, right?
Yeah,
Which
Storaro one.
I've seen the Storaro range, and we've commented on some of the features and the reasons why it might not be great. But I think the open face single point could be interesting to play with reflections, right? Because that's the next way.
I have a couple of RCLs that's very narrow.
Yes. Can you explain what an ACL is, or does everybody know?
Do everybody know what's an aircraft landing light? Yeah. And they're really pointy. Yeah. And
It's like a mole beam with very narrow.
Just 16.
16. It works on DC power, right? And it's very narrow. They used to use them on airstrips. Now you can.
No.
You've got 4 of them, right? That's a great story. Can we please tell the story? Tell the story. How you?
Yeah, I read. I think it was an American cinematographer. I read that Storaro used these, so I thought. And I was going to Rome, and I read somewhere. I think the gaffer was in Rome, and I just knocked on his door. I went down there with my family, and they were really pissed off me because I went off again. And it was like the outskirt of Rome, and I knocked on his door, and I said, "I'm from Denmark. I've heard you made some lights. Do you sell them?" And I got him to sell me 3 sets of each. Yeah.
I think as a background, what's amazing about this is that those lights are like considered obsolete in Rome. Because I did a film in Italy, and when I got excited about using tungsten, the idea of using tungsten outside, and everyone at the lighting company were like rolling their eyes and say, "You guys are crazy. Why are you using them?" But I think it's amazing that you went to Rome and got them, because they're fantastic lights. I mean, when you see them, there's nothing else like it. But the fact that you went there and they sold them to you, it's brilliant, because I think it's great to still use that technology for a specific job. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean the color, tungsten is just really nice. I think it emulates late sun so good. So I have those and the mold beams because I love them because of the color and if I want to shoot late in the day, and also other times, of course. Yeah.
Maybe just look at a few behind the scene pictures, right? We can talk about that the most then. Yeah. To go on. I'll just flip through Frank's right now because we got them open.
This was done on a commercial for Carlsberg, and it was a ladder, old, what do you call it, a barn, an old barn, and this was taken over by a guy that makes really nice bicycles. And what I did in this shot, I had the panny on the next floor, and I just went straight, and I just took a lot of mirrors and just bounced it off. That's what you're seeing coming from underneath here.
Mirrors or reflectors?
Reflectors, sorry. Reflectors, and just smoke. This is the same thing. It was like we were going to different craft people doing this. So this was a guy who made leather. And I had out here, I just fired in a I think it was a dado coming in here, daylight. No, tungsten, I think it was tungsten. And I had the mirrors just, can you see the next one? What it does? Like this. And what's here, the thing is when you do you need to get the light away. So very often I have the light in 2 other rooms and shooting in, and I have to keep people away from walking through the light all the time because they will do this. Closer.
That's actually something I should comment on, is when you know, it's not just us, it's so many departments that are trying to work together on a film. And everybody starts with the premises, they know the process, how the movie's going to be made. And when you change one thing, and you say, no, I'm not putting 18Ks, I'm not putting 12 bys, I'm not putting 12 bys, especially a production partner side gets nervous, because they know exactly how long things should take to make it work. When you start to change that, there's something else that happens that they don't understand what you're doing, and there's a lot of communication I had to do in the beginning to get everybody on track. I had this on the last movie. The first AD got totally mad at me. And I said, what's going on? And he said, well, everybody's just standing around, and 2 guys are fumbling on some reflectors. Why can't we shoot? Everything's in space. Because what we know from original shooting is as soon as the cherry picker comes up, it's a few minutes and we can go, basically. But with the reflectors it takes very little time to set up, so you actually get more time to actually create the light you want to create. And that's something that I found out to myself, I really have to communicate. Look, all the guys did their job, it's all in there. We said 20 minutes, it's only 5 minutes that have passed. And let's maybe not take 20, just give me 10 more, but we got to figure out exactly where to position the reflectors. So there's a different process involved in there as well that as soon as everybody gets on track, it's all cool, but to get there is a thing, the same people walking through lights, similar.
I forgot, this is on the 4th floor, and I was alone this day when I did this. Oh, this is another job. I took a mold beam 2K inside. It was a staircase, maybe next. Oh, there, yeah. So here the DoP wanted the light to come from up, but I didn't have a cherry picker. So I took the 2K in and used the reflectors to shoot light into the... another job. Mold beams again in a church. I was not alone that day. I had one more with me. And you see, yeah. There's a dado. Oh, that's a jump to another commercial. This is the hair shoot again. Of course, I also use other lights than the reflectors.
Yeah. That's an Aurasoft, right?
Yes. You can. Sometimes you can find them. I just bought it again. I liked it. This is an outside thing I did. This was, I can't remember what it was, but we had 2 10Ks mold beams shooting in, and a 5K, it's a par. And I didn't do this, I didn't reflect them, the ones on this side. I just went straight. But I think there's another one, right? And there's the penny going into a reflector there. And I don't think this is the same. But again, I try to cramp in mold beams all the time.
Was that reflected light there on the side?
Yes. The penny is over here shooting into a reflector, and I had 2 Muslim bounce also. It was a double thing. This is a shoot where I did it, I had no cherry picker, but I had a balcony. So is the video on, this is combined with...
Is that a video?
No, the next one, right? Isn't there a video? There.
What happens there?
No, that's the penny.
That's the penny.
But no more, I'm sorry.
So what's the equivalent you ask for in London for that?
The penny?
Yeah.
It depends on how much I fiddle with it. And but it's pretty powerful. I would say an M90. No, M40. Yeah, M40. Sorry.
Ideally, when they first finished them in the lab, we got 120,000 lux out of them on 5 meters. So that was the optimal thing. And when it went apart, it just became less and stuff. Yeah.
This was a car shoot we did from. That's the company. Yeah. I don't know if there's a picture of where the mirrors are, or the reflectors. This is maybe funny. Here I had a unbleached Muslim with 3.6Ks coming in from outside, but the DoP said, we're going to shoot 200 frames. And I said, okay, I'll have a problem here because. So what I did was I took the pani in, and maybe you can show the other one. Not that one. Not that one. There. And I fired that into the softest one, and I just put a gel on that to emulate the color of the Muslim, and it was perfect. Yeah.
So basically, you had a key outside with a Muslim with 6Ks, and there wasn't enough inside. You then brought in the pani plus a super wide to lift up the basic level of the whole thing. It's up. You can have a look at it over there. Then the interesting thing about exactly this is, like, of course you can lose Muslim. It doesn't matter if it's spilling all over the place because the window's taking care of the problem that you have. But as soon as you start to bring that kind of soft light inside, you're going to bring a lot of gear to contain that stuff, light where it needs to go. So with the reflector, that's...
Yeah, we needed to make negative fill all over because of the Muslim. So it was black there, and I mean everywhere. You were not angling the camera nearly. You see it there. There.
I just want to ask you, when you go out on these jobs, what sort of, in terms of the CRLS, what kind of kit are you bringing typically on your jobs? Is it?
This one here, I had my Sprinter. I have a Mercedes Sprinter. It's a small job. I did it by myself. So this I just got the help with the pani because it's 50 kilos. But I wasn't intending on going so big on this job, but it's a problem I have. I have a problem controlling it.
What the image really shows nicely is that it's again the fall off. The further you get the light source away from the reflector, the further you can get, and the closer you keep the reflector to the window, the more control you keep over the set. Because, I mean, obviously fall off, we've done it often, you just put the light source further far away. But you lose control of the room, because it's just panning the lamp in and out. But keeping the reflector so close to the window, you can check it out in the small box. Gives you a full variation, the full control of the room, actually.
Yeah, it's just a mirror or a reflector. Here, go back. This we did on a train station. It was we had the sun here, and I'm sorry I don't have the picture on the other end, but we had people going up and down here, and this is a typical thing for me when the sun is out, and I just need. Yeah.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
So all these pictures, I think it makes you, to me the question for you, Jakob, would be, have you ever thought about building a larger one, and why did you stick to the sizes 50 and 100 centimeters? Why not going for a different shape?
I mean, the one thing is the sizes. It just kind of made sense to almost double the size. Like 15, okay, close, 25, 50, 100. That was the one thing. And the other thing is that it just kind of makes sense to have more control over the room, because we always used to say the bigger source, the better it is. I actually can show you this. Give me a second. So anyway, if you put 3 reflectors in front of a window, you actually can say they go in directly, or you cross-light them through the window. So that's just going to give you a completely different control of the light in the room. Because that's the great thing, obviously, about it. If you just put a big, like you say, you put the big muslin bounce outside, it is what it is. There is no changing it. And if you want to say less on the ceiling, more down there, that's really what's going to make the difference there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really would like to have a penny more, because then I can cross the lights. So if I have windows here, I could shoot one down there and one from the other end. So I just move the mirrors. So if I'm shooting this way or this way, I could just move C-stands, really. Yep.
So just to give you a quick example, those are again my not so favorite lights down there, going up into the reflectors and then going into the set. So you can see up here that was on by the sea. You see the 3 reflectors on top there. So basically each window had those 3 reflectors, not one big source, but actually 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's where it's hanging. And then when you look inside here, right now the sky is covered. So this is just a basic fill light coming in really naturally. And then by adding the reflectors with, I think, quarter CTS or something, you start to get this. So the difference in light is just extreme, because you get control over it. Because it's, in this case, the light should come from the cove up. So it was a bounce that came back. So we wanted more light on the ceiling than down on the floor. But at the same time, you just can go ahead and don't go off the floor and get a completely different look.
Can I ask you a question?
So, I mean, I think this is fantastic. The question I had was, is this when you were experimenting with remote systems to control the reflectors, or was it all done by hand?
This was shot, like the movie said, by the sea, and with every evening we had storms coming in. So we had to come up with a rigging system that was so tight that nothing would happen. So I actually had guys walking out into a truss. We had a safe way to walk, and we really just pounded those things down with pipes not to move, because we know we had to shoot until, like the health and safety department said, we got to get off of here. So that's where we had to go. And then on the Michael Haneke movie later, we had them. I can show that actually. Can I show this? Oh, this was an Instagram that is. There it is.
Any questions?
This was like the remote system, and we mounted on the top, and again to get fill light, we added the reflectors, and we had a white underneath, and an oopsie. And then this was the light inside. So you have turning on Haneke here, and the light's coming in through the window. And again, it's about control. How much light do you want to have inside? How much do you want to have the fall off to have? With one big source, you lose this. With the smaller sources, yeah, you gain stuff. And again, it was a rig. But the lights down below, lighting up, lighting inside, and that was already with prototypes of the remote system. Yeah.
How long would that take to set up?
1 day rigging, half a day pre-light with 7 guys. Yeah. We're getting towards the end of our time here. Oh, I do want to show one stuff from John, which is really interesting. Because with the reflectors, it's not only about which light source you have, but also if you're moving with the sun. Can I give it this for a second? Can you talk about this?
Yeah, that's gender up in the right corner. This is kind of a little bit of a test because, you know, this is a music video, so everything we were doing was, you know, half the time you're making stuff as you go and everybody's throwing things at you. But we just mounted 2 blue because we needed a fair amount of light into the car. It was, you know, overhead sun at that point. And I actually never saw the final footage of that scene, but it's a super easy rig. Everything's safety. You know, we angled it, and then we actually drove them around.
Why didn't you put a sky panel on front? You slid in.
Because we didn't have that.
Wait a minute, that's the wrong answer.
The tower was actually driving through the streets of New York.
It was driving through the streets of New York like that, and it was the first time I'd done it. Well, the grips did the rig, but it was the first time I'd done that, and I thought it worked pretty nicely.
What was the difference to putting a light up front, but doing it like this?
Well, again, this was I think it was a bit of a, I mean, it's like you were saying earlier, you got to kind of stretch out, try new things, and, you know, it wasn't something we had planned in advance, and I don't know if we really made choices in advance, like, okay, what are we going to use in the car rig? We kind of got there and thought, okay, what do we have to solve the problem we have in front of us right now? You know, if you have a light there, like let's say it was a sky panel, right? So, you know, the light's not changing. Maybe you could set a cloud moving or something like that. But this is as the car drives, you're naturally getting sunlight pinging into the reflectors going into the car, and I think maybe there's a more organic quality to that.
We did something similar in By the Sea in a nighttime shot. So we just basically had a street that had strong sodium vapor lights, and we added 2 reflectors for each car side. So one reflector was catching the sodium vapor that was coming in early. So we got an early of the sodium vapor. And the second reflector was set so we were still catching some of the light that actually had passed the car. So what happened was when the car's driving, you always have this dead spot of light, and the reflectors kind of help to even that out. And the most intense thing about it is it's totally in sync. I've never seen this. At nighttime, we always are fiddling around with some LED or some dimmer, and you're never in sync. So it's just a feeling of something's happening. But by having this so entirely in sync, it was like we were driving the full night, and then at the end of the night, Brad was making a joke, and he fell asleep on the steering wheel. We were in a process trailer. And it's really everybody in the camera department suddenly went like that, because the whole body gets into the sync of something. That's something light is really physical. And when that happens, for whatever reason, we ting into that. And that's the reason one of the powerful things in the scene is not we're trying to fake something. It's actually in the exact tempo the car is driving, the light's going by, and and I think the same thing here. Like if you're driving and you get into a cloudy part, it's gonna go with it.
Yeah, exactly.
When some other light comes in, you're driving through trees, it's gonna get green. Mm-hmm. So you're keeping exactly that same color, and that's actually enhancing the quality, I think, totally.
Which you wouldn't have with the traditional fixture.
Yeah.
I've done this too also, but what I will do the sky with one of them, and then I'll do the backlight with the sun. Mm-hmm. So, but could we, sorry.
This is just to show, you know, simple rigging of small reflectors, you know, on set. I mean, you can pretty much rig to anything. They're so lightweight, and you know, you just shoot a Joe Lico HMI, you know, what do you call it? Joker bug into a Joker bug source 4. Now, this is actually a video. Is it? Now, this is a jail where I was given 10 minutes, and they said, hey, can you go light that room really quickly? And I had 1 light left over, which was a Joker Source 4 800 into about 6 different reflectors of different qualities, some black, some number 2s.
So they were all double reflections?
Well, these are all single reflections, but it's picking up a single beam of light with multiple reflectors. So
when you were shooting this scene with, I guess, people in there, did they have multiple shadows?
No. This actually was, I originally thought there were going to be people in it, but they just wanted to do so. It's a documentary on can't remember what, some jail thing. So there originally was going to be somebody in that scene, and then they ended up just shooting it as a room.
It's interesting with the way that reflectors are engineered. It has a feathering towards the side. So when you add one reflector into another one, you're not going to get a double shadow because it's really easily going to fade out. If you have hard ones and you spread them up like that, obviously, of course, it's going to be spots and shadows.
I mean, there's another example I had. This is just another Joe Lico setup on an interior. Another commercial for a hotel spa chain or something like that. So this again was easy. Couple reflectors rigged up in the ceiling where there wasn't, really a chance. You couldn't really put a light up there. But again, the choice was a different quality of light. And again, just a couple Joe Licos coming back on talent.
But that's a great example, because if you wanted to get less light out of that, say that the DoP tells you it's too bright, you don't need to go to that mirror physically. You can do it with the shutters, or if you've got an iris control, you could control that with the iris. I think that's when this system really comes into play, and it's interesting because you can do it from the camera side.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You can do it there are a lot of choices to do it from the light. And as we know, these are HMI lights, which if you start dimming them, they shift color a little bit. So you've suddenly got essentially dimmability in your HMI fixture, which is, brilliant. And you can also do it on the reflector too. I mean, in a different setup where maybe the reflector's on the ground, you could feather it in and out, and suddenly it's just as if you were dimming.
Yeah, just because that's a major thing about the reflectors. When you go in and out of the light source, it's like dimming. It changes the shadow a little bit, obviously. The smaller the light on the reflector, obviously a little bit more punchy it's going to get. But it's a real tool. There was a question back there.
Yeah, could you say that different reflectors reflect in specific angles, and what angles would that be?
The thing about the CRLS is that it is reduced down to the max. We left everything away that could be in the way of the light. So when you get to a point of a reflector, it's going to be the same. It's a lens system. So you have a reflector and you've got a light source. And the closer you're going to move in with the light source to the reflector, the bigger your angle is going to be. It's like flood and spot.
It's exactly that. If you look at Fresnel light, you do get some direct, but it's basically you're moving it backwards and forwards from a reflector, the parabolic reflector at the back of the fixture. So it's the same concept, really, applied to a larger scale. It's nothing new, really.
No, I mean, it's just basically, there's two philosophies there, which is really interesting. Is like Frank and myself, we're the guys that say, the more distance we get, the less fall off, the more beautiful it's going to be. So we're pushing back. And I was talking to a colleague from the Meyer Brothers rental house in Germany, a really good gaffer, Niels Meyer, and he said, hell no, he always puts the lamp there that he can go up on a stand and down so he can flood and spot it, which is really interesting actually, to use it that way. But for me personally, because obviously I'm always trying to get a real natural look with Christian, I'm always getting out the distance, but it is a real tool to do it like this. To go in and out of the reflector. And then yes, of course, the more diffuse the surface gets, the more spread you're going to get from the light. So it's these two things. So basically, if you understand light, the reflectors are no issue. If you're trying to learn light, the reflectors are great to do so. If you can light with the reflectors, you can light with anything. It becomes a piece of cake if you're starting out, I'd say. Yeah. This is not.
No, it's just a question. I mean, I don't know if you mentioned it, but it's also the whole freedom that it gives you for the exterior. I mean, looking out the window with the camera, you don't have a whole forest of plants out there. And that's a pretty important point, I guess.
Peter Plesner from BB&S Lighting, he's absolutely right about it. It's really about, if you can keep your set free, it's going to really be an advantage for your directors. You're going to give everybody a lot of freedom. So what Christian does is he always rigs the reflectors outside of a window. They still can look outside. So, or you cross light it, you put left and right of the frame, and then you light in. So that's really the freedom. this thin footprint you have, a small footprint you have on the set also applies to looking outside of windows, which is great.
Another thing you were showing this huge rig around by the sea, but that rig was that big because you used it also as shading. I mean, you had wasn't up there something to cover the sun.
Yeah, the rig you do not need this rig to use the CRLS, as you can see. It really was meant and purposely shooting 3 months in Malta to be able to have multiple positions, so you can retract the rig and come out again. You can get really funky with this stuff, but it's nothing have to do with the CRLS. That's basic pure rigging genius.
I'll just give you a little info on this. This is for a commercial project. The client could not decide what they wanted to do with the background colors, so they were going to make decisions on that later. Initially, talent was going to be moving upstage and downstage. And this is another great example, again, about taking some chances. And I had never worked with the mold beam with the CRLS before, and the DP I was working with was a little bit more of an operator, a little less of a lighting guy, so he was really nervous and he wanted to go with soft light. And I said, well, you know, these suits would really come alive if we used harder light, harder sources. And so if you go back to the next one, it's a video. So we had the mold beam in this tiny studio shooting all the way across into a reflector and then back onto the set. Now I had two 12-bys on either side because I had to have a fallback plan when they said, we don't like it, or we want to go soft light. And but ultimately, they, to their credit, they decided this was early in the process, so not everything is completely set up. But it was essentially just that light, and then of course the client kept adding more and more and more fill light, which was always the problem, and they dumbed it down a little bit more than I thought was nicer in the earlier stages. But
what you can also see here is, like with a lot of light sources on the market, they're talking about light, but they're never talking about shadow, because I think the soul of a light source you will always see in the shadow. You'll always see the quality of the light, and with the reflectors, and obviously the good light sources on the market too, you really get nice tonal different kinds of shadows together like this, which is eventually we're removing right now because everybody's done enough soft light, like we've seen with LED flood sources. It's going to be interesting where it's going to go with more punchier sources in the next few years. So it's all about shadows, I think.
I think there's just one more I was going to...
I think you had a question.
Yeah, here.
Sorry, I thought there was a question.
Just regarding if you want to make your light source larger, get maybe softer light, would you put the 1 meter, like maybe put 4 of them next to each other, or would you do that?
I'm always careful with the term soft source because it is, honestly, I don't know how you guys see it, but the way we light is not so precise really. We just kind of bang into something and then kind of go through a frame. And with the reflectors, it becomes more precise. So soft light is a combination between the diffusion level and the size. So it doesn't mean because you got a diffused reflector 7 by 7 centimeters, it's going to give you what we know as soft light. It's going to be a hard shadow. And the bigger that source is going to be, the less that's going to be. And as we've seen up there, that's the reason I showed the Angelina Jolie example. If you put 3 next to each other, yes, of course, it's going to become one source because it's far enough away. It's like with a Dino. If you go far enough away, you're not going to have multiple shadows. So that kind of makes sense. But in terms of the wraparound with the reflectors, you'd have to go to super wide to get that. Or you do the Deacon style. You say you kind of put 3 sources up, right? So you have like a little bit punchy from the back, here from the side and there. But otherwise, you can see with the reflector, if you guys later try to go in and out of the light source, looking at the reflector, you'll see how it kind of feathers out. So it really doesn't matter how big that source is going to be if it's a harder reflector. It's just going to be one reflection coming out of it. So that's something to really look into.
Yeah, I think later, if you have a chance, Jacob's got this brilliant little model house over there. And you can literally hold each of the different flavors of reflector in your hand and bring it close to the window and move it around and really see a lot of what he's been talking about in terms of the quality of light coming out of the reflector, how you can shape it, how angling it in different ways changes the whole dynamic of the room. So this was another project with Gendra. It was a music video, and again, one light source. That's another one. So basically, you know, again, they threw this setup at the last minute. I grabbed one Lico I had left. I used another 6 reflectors, and it's sort of lighting up the, you know, entire set, basically. There's one additional Lico that was a special on a sign. This is early, that we're still lighting here, so it's not really all finished, but that gives you the general idea of, and again, it was really quick because Gendra had to be shooting something else, and she's like, light this, and so I just, you know, came and as quickly as we could, you know, got this together, and it's so fast with these little reflectors. One beam of light, boom, 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 angle it, and I just hit all, and they wanted a very sort of theatrical look, and they had this iconic, what do you call it, Black Panther chair that they wanted her, you know, to sit in, and they wanted a really theatrical, you know, look.
Just to wrap it up there, I'd have to say a lot of credit always to cinematographers like Jen as well, who are willing to do that next step. Because we can be excited about something as gaffers, but it's another story to actually sell it into the DP. So this combination of things and talks here, I hope helps a little bit get you all into the mindset. There's some really good gaffers over here I'm working on it right now. So thank you very much for coming. I guess we're around here, so if there are any questions on hands-on stuff especially, that's actually what we're good at. So thanks so much for coming.